Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite parts of modeling, and that is the weathering. This is an area that it's easy to get it wrong, but when you get it right, it makes the difference between a toy-looking airplane and a authentic-looking warbird that's seen action somewhere in the world. And of course, we're using the F-4U Corsair, the E-flite 1.2 meter. That's the project we're working on here. And so the weathering techniques that I'm going to be using for this aircraft, a lot of them are going to be the same as what I would use for, say, if I was doing a P-51 out of England or a P-47 operating on the front lines, let's say, of a captured airbase in France. But there's also going to be some differences. One of the biggest differences is going to be the type of environment the airplane is operating in. For the Corsair, it's operating off of a kind of a coral island in the South Pacific. And if you've ever spent time near the ocean or on any tropical island, you'll know that it's not really muddy next to the coastline. Like, you don't find like brown mud or red mud. You find like this salty kind of crushed coral, crushed shell type white powder everywhere. So for this particular airplane, a lot of the weathering is going to be done using some light colors on the spectrum, either white and light grays. Where if I was doing a P-47 or a P-51, let's say around the undercarriage and things like that, and the wing walkway, I'd be using a lot more brown tones to simulate kind of the dirt and grime that would be in those environments. So it's important to know what type of aircraft you're going to be working on to know what type of weathering technique. But otherwise, the techniques for exhaust staining, oil staining, grime, grease, all that is going to be exactly the same regardless of what you're doing. So let's first start with the type of products that I use. So the thing I love using the most are chalk pastels. This is I picked up either from a hobby shop or who knows where, Hobby Lobby, Amazon, I don't even remember where. Could even be left over from a college art class. I like to use the grayscale. The grayscale ones include everything from black all the way through gray through white. And the reason why I like to use these is it gives me a wide range of different colors to use from. Because remember, not everything is going to be black. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see in weathering on RC planes as well as scale model planes is everything is black. It looks as if the airplane flew through the Pelosi raid and actually landed and flew right through an oil tank. I mean, they're just covered from nose to tail, wing to wing, everything, just solid black. And every panel line is solid black, and everywhere is black. That's not realistic. You need to use a spectrum of color in different shades. So that's why I use the set here, which has everything from black all the way to white. So just to kind of give you an idea without dropping any of these, you can see here it starts with a couple blacks, and then it goes into the different grays all the way to white. And so these work for everything. I've used the same set on scale model planes. I've used it on RC planes. I also use, if I'm using any type of olive drab and I want to fade the olive drab, I use a little bit of this kind of a brownish gold color. That thin down works very well for olive drab. And I don't have the red with me, but I use a little bit of red and blue when I weather exhaust staining, because if you ever looked at what happens to exhaust pipes when they get really hot, they change color. They have a little bit of red, a little bit of gold, a little bit of blue, purple. They have different shades in there, so you can use that to model it. Now, to apply the chalk down to the surface, I have a number of things I use. I got a couple different paintbrushes here. I got one that's it's just an old model paintbrush that is pretty well flattened out and really hard. It's a real stiff bristle. And I use this one to actually get in between panel lines, around rivets, around screw heads, anything like that. And then I have a softer one that I also use. And I use this a lot to simulate oil streaks and kind of some light duty or some light streaking. For larger areas, I use a little piece of a Q-tip here. I start with a full Q-tip and just kind of break it off into small pieces. And then I kind of rotate it, it's like basically 2 to 3 sides. Got a dark side, and then a gray side, and then a white side. And that usually helps diffuse it. Because remember, there's not going to be really defined streaks on the airplane unless they're oil streaks. Everything else, like grease and grime and dust and exhaust, it kind of spreads out and diffuses as it moves around the airplane. And I think that's one area that a lot of people get wrong, is they use the same consistent thickness on everything. So like an exhaust stain, from the time it comes out the exhaust tip to the time it exits the plane, it is just a straight line of solid black and the same thickness, and that's not at all how it looks like. And the same with the panel lines. Not every panel line is dirty, and not every panel line has the same amount of grease and grime on it. So that covers it from the what I consider the chalk pastel type of weathering. Chipping is another part of the weathering process. And for chipping, you know, anytime you get paint chips, I use two things. I have a can of silver and a can or a little bottle here of green zinc chromate. Remember, the aircraft would have been covered with zinc chromate prior to paint. It's kind of part of their primer process. So you want to use a little bit of the green zinc. You put this down first, and then I come over it with the silver next. So what I'm trying to do is actually simulate the paint, the top layer peeling off, and then the exposure of the zinc chromate, and then the zinc chromate peeling off as well, and then you get the base aluminum. So just getting a little creative there with trying to layer the effect of the weathering. And then the most important tool you can have when you begin to weather your airplane: research books. Research books are absolutely vital. Of course, if you don't have the book, you can still go on the internet. And what you're going to be looking for are examples, even if you can't find your exact airplane. You can find aircraft that are in the same tour, the same time period, the same amount of missions, and you can use that to kind of base how the airplane will weather. One of the great pictures I have in the Skull and Crossbones book is right up here, and it's Kepford's White 29. This is, of course, the second one, the more famous of all of them, but it's great because you can see here, you can see the paint is chipped off most of the screw heads around the cowl, the top of the fuselage here. You can see how the fuel draining has come down and kind of lightened up the paint and streaked down. Now, historians believe that the fuselage has been repainted because it's less weathered than the wings. But on the wings, you can see that it's got the chipping all around the walkway area here, where the crew would have been up here working on towards the engine and refueling. It's got streaks coming down over the top of the wings, a lot of chipping on the leading edge, chipping that goes on the walkways, and it really up around here on the tail. There's all sorts of great examples just in this one single picture that you can use. And what's great is books like this are just covered with detailed pictures. Usually it's of crew members. That's what the guys took pictures of. They took pictures of their buddies. If you look at the background, you can really get a good idea on how these aircraft would have weathered. You may not see everything, but if you study enough of the pictures and you study enough of pictures from that same time period, you can get a pretty accurate feel for how the aircraft is going to be weathered. So we've already started on the Corsair. I got quite a bit of it done. I've been working on it over the course of a few weeks, just maybe 15, 20 minutes here and there, but it's most certainly not done yet. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of go over a few of the areas, and I'm actually going to demonstrate them here on camera. If you notice, the wings are not on yet, so we will not be talking about exhaust staining or weathering of any of the wing. Those will be separate videos. We just want to focus on the fuselage. So I'm going to go ahead and change the aircraft in its orientation a little bit so you guys can see this a little bit better, and then we'll get started on some of the weathering here on this side. All right, so the first thing I'm going to start doing is I'm going to bring over my darker colors here, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of the panel lines here. And I'm going to pick kind of a dark gray color, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the panel lines that I can tell from the pictures definitely get some use. So I'm just going to start working down through some of these panel lines here. Okay. These are all sorts of maintenance access panels that would have been accessed in the aircraft while it's in service. So we're just going to come around here, and it's okay to get on a little thick at this point. It's actually it's with the blue coloring, it's actually extremely difficult to see what you're working on here if the lighting is not right. Okay, so we're just going to go over a couple of these. While I'm going to go over a couple of the screw heads here. You've noticed I've already chipped a number of these screw heads already, and not every one of them needs to be chipped either. So I'm going to come over here and do some of these up here. And what's great about this fine brush here is I'm able to really get inside here. Go over the top of the fuel tank here. Okay. Like I said, this is more of a thick one, And then what I do is after I get that, I got a piece of paper towel here, and I'm just going to, what I do is I try to kind of pull the coloring and fading down this direction. The reason is because if the aircraft would have got wet sitting on the tarmac, or basically not even the tarmac, sitting on the sitting out on a coral strip of land in the Pacific, the aircraft would of course be sitting nose up in this orientation, tail down. And of course, as rainwater and stuff like that, it's going to kind of just roll off the side of the fuselage. It's never going to go straight back, and it's never going to go straight down. It's going to kind of just roll back with gravity on there. Okay, so we have some of that done. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to simulate a little bit of the kind of that salty, sandy, crushed coral and shell that would get inside the some of the panels. So even though I just went over the panels with a dark color, I'm just going to add a little bit of light in here. Okay. And I'm just playing with different color light grays. Okay. This is a foot or a handhold area up here, so I'm just going to add a little bit around that, a little bit on the crease here. Okay, just work through, get a couple on the cowl. So it's a little bit more difficult to do this on camera when you know, I'm trying to show you guys without getting in the way. Okay, so I'm just going to go a little bit down here. And then once again, I'm going to grab that piece of paper towel and I'm just going to kind of come down like this on an angle. Okay. Okay. And if you notice this area here that's already been heavily kind of chipped and worn, this is actually a footstep here. This is a handrail up here, or a hand push. So as the pilot would get in and out, his leg would actually come down this surface here and feel for this little trap door, and then push it in with his foot, and then kind of come out of the aircraft. So we know this area here gets quite a bit of dirt and grime from the pilot, the crew members, crew chiefs getting in and out of the aircraft, working on it. So for that, we're going to use a little bit of darker, just to kind of simulate some more of that kind of the grease and grime and kind of the mess you get from people climbing in and out of the aircraft. Remember, these operated in very primitive conditions. This is definitely not as clean as an aircraft carrier would have been in combat. These guys were basically hauled off to an island with their aircraft and stuck there, so they're going to be pretty dirty. However, this particular airplane is actually, this is going to be Kepford's first Corsair, and he took delivery of this in September, and it's going to be modeled after the airplane he flew in between September and the end of November, early December timeframe. So the airplane is not going to be too terribly weathered and dirty. It's not going to be nearly as rough shape as a lot of the other ones that you'll see that went for a lot longer of a service. These were brand new airplanes when they were delivered on the USS Bunker Hill in September, and they went to Pearl Harbor to be offloaded and then put on an escort carrier and hauled out into the Solomon Islands. This was supposed to be the first carrier-based Corsair group, but due to a change in what they had available for maintenance, they decided that spare parts would be better suited for the Grumman aircraft, such as the Hellcat. And the Corsair, since there's only one of them, one squadron of them, they decided to haul off and take them to the Solomons to help support from the ground rather than a carrier. So, with all that said, there's not going to be that much chipping and weathering that's going to happen. Basically, imagine if your car was on vacation for about 1 month in on a tropical island next to the water, how much of that sea salt and crushed coral would get on the car. So we're going to kind of mimic that a little bit. Plus, you got to remember too that these things were in combat conditions and kept pretty dirty. So it's just a matter of getting that balance right. You're going to want to use the reference books, and that's how you know how to weather it so you don't overdo it. So moving up to the top here, we have the fuel filler area. There's a huge gas tank that was in front of the canopy, or in front of the cockpit here, and a lot of times fuel would drain down. So let's go ahead and let's simulate that. All right, it would flow down, kind of flows away from the filler neck here. And these things, this area also leaked really bad. So if you see that white tape on a number of Corsairs, the reason that white tape is there is because of fuel vapors and fuel seepage out of this area of the fuselage getting into the cockpit and causing problems for the pilots. So that's why you'll see quite a bit of that white tape. Okay, so let me just kind of bring it down a little bit. Go. Like I said, always following that same basic curvature. Okay, so we have that, and you know, obviously it takes a lot more than what I'm going to show here on the video, but at least you kind of get an idea how to make this work. There's also going to be a little bit of being a radial engine, these things leaked horribly, so we're just going to add a little bit of oil seepage out of underneath these cowl flaps. And this would never go straight back. This would actually follow the curvature of the wing. So you actually need to lift this area up and then bring it down, okay? So there you go, we're just gonna bring it down. Go. There, it would follow the curvature of the airflow as it leaks out. And of course, radial engine airplanes leak horribly. If it stops leaking, then you know it doesn't have any more fluid in it, you got a problem. So now we've covered that portion of it. I do want to cover a little bit of kind of that, like I mentioned, that sea salt crushed shell that would get all over the upper surfaces of the aircraft. And so what I do for this is I got my cotton ball here, and I do want to just run over some of the top surface here with the cotton ball. And I just want to add a little bit of white and light gray up on the top here, okay? And I just want to go back and forth with it. Kind of simulate some of that that crushed coral sea salt that would just kind of pour. It'd sit up on the top of the aircraft here and just kind of flow down with rainwater. Just kind of gets dusty, and this really just sits on the top surface. So we just want to keep going down, follow that same kind of basic line of curvature that we showed earlier. Also, the top of the blue would fade a little bit as well, especially sitting out in the sun. These things went from I think they went from the East Coast all the way to Hawaii, and then on an escort carrier. So they spent quite a bit of time above deck, and all that time above deck would fade the paint a little bit. Even though they were new, they're still sitting on that deck for quite a while. So I'm just gonna kind of give a little bit of this fading down here. Give a little bit of weathered look. There's an access panel back here, a little door where they would do some inspection. So for an inspection door, what I will do is I will use my dark blackish gray here, and I'll use it on my stiff brush, and I'm going to go around the hinge and access part of this door. And I already have a little bit of chipping on that already. Okay, just real light, just around there. This door probably folded down, so it'd have a little bit of dirt around it, or a little access panel here. So we're just going to put a little bit of black and grime on that, and then we use this to soften it, kind of diffuse it and soften it up. Okay, just like that. All right, and that kind of covers a little bit of the weathering of the fuselage. And at this point, besides the bottom of it, I'd say the top of the aircraft is really done. There isn't much more I want to do to it. If you go too far, you can ruin it. It's best to go less is more when dealing with weathering. But otherwise, if you guys got any questions on how to weather any type of a warbird, by all means, just leave your comments below. I'll be more than happy to help out. I'm going to be definitely doing a lot more to this project. We have the upper wings we still need to weather. And then I'm going to assemble the wings. We'll flip the aircraft upside down, and we're going to do everything underneath. So that's where all the oils, most of your oil staining is going to be, your exhaust staining. You're going to have the staining of the guns to deal with, access panels. There's all sorts of stuff still to do. But at this point, we're going to consider the fuselage done in terms of weathering. I will seal this with a can of clear coat. I use a tester spray clear coat, and all that I'm trying to do is seal in the the chalk and powder and stuff that I used on the aircraft and keep it from smearing. So that's the last step. I usually do that before I put the decals on, and then the fuselage is done.